Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Unlock's webinar to learn about the 2020 census. My name is Catherine Kelly, and I'm the Senior Government Affairs Manager with Unlock. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items before our presentation. We are recording the first part of our webinar today so that we can share the important information from the Census Bureau with people who could not attend. We have also temporarily muted everyone and disabled the chat box so you can still send messages to Unlock staff as the hosts if you have any questions. And after the presentation, we will stop recording and unmute everyone and then open up the chat box so that you can ask any questions to our speaker. So please hold on to your questions until the end of the presentation. Every 10 years, the US Census is conducted to count everyone living in the country. And participation in the census is extremely important. So we're very happy that you're here today to learn more. The census determines government funding for services for the next 10 years. Important programs like nutrition assistance, housing, parks, public transportation, libraries, and where hospitals are built. So it's very important that everyone complete the census to ensure that our community has enough federal funding for important programs and services that allow seniors to stay in their homes and communities. Today we will hear from Ray Muller from the US Census Bureau, who will explain more about the 2020 census, how to fill it out, and where you can get help filling it out if you need it. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and I will hand it over to Ray for his presentation. Oh, I think you're still muted, and I think
there we go.
Presentation may have disappeared.
I'm going to put it back up in just a moment.
Great.
So I did want to make sure everybody understood that there is a human behind all of this. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate the effort that your organization has put into it, and I appreciate all of the folks that you'll be sharing it with, taking the time to actually watch this and understand why it's so important today. Just to give you a couple of quick points, the United States Census has been going on since 1790, so this is not something new. It has not changed a whole lot. Basically, we ask for specific information about your name, your age, your date of birth, and we identify those individuals that live in each residence. We do that in order to better identify the need for funding, not just for within our cities, but even within the companies and organizations that want to come to our neighborhoods. For instance, if you wanted a new Whole Foods, or you wanted a specific church or nonprofit to consider taking up space in your neighborhood, they need to understand who lives there. And they want to do that by having basic information about you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. And there we go. So, first of all, I want to make sure everybody understands that you can do this today. You can go to 2020census.gov or my2020census.gov, and you can fill out your form online right now. If you wish to do that alongside on the next to the presentation, feel free to. We want to make sure you understand that it is not too late to do this. Census workers will be coming out and knocking on your doors starting on August the 11th. And your final postcard will be arriving within the next few days. That postcard will have a number that identifies your address and will give you the opportunity to use that instead of needing to fill out all of that address information. However, if you don't get that postcard, don't worry about it. You don't require that in order to participate. Now, what you're going to see here is, if I can make this work, is this is a, This is what the opening screen looks like. You'll notice across the top of that screen there are various languages listed. Any of those languages, if you click on that language, it will change the entire website to that language. Everything but the word Census 2020 changes. So if you don't want to do the whole form in English, say you have a non-English speaker in your home, you can start the form in your language, slip it over to their language, and let them sit down and do their own information, if that makes them feel more comfortable. Because some folks just don't want to tell you how they would identify themselves. Now, this is the basic landing screen when you go into my2020census.gov. There it is. Now, when you log in, you'll notice that there is a 12-digit census ID, as I mentioned, that is available on anything we have mailed you since March the 12th. If you go in and take a look at your mail that you've received, and that the 12-digit ID for your address would be on that mailing, you will notice your name is nowhere on that mailing. And that is because we are that serious about our privacy. We do not want to share your personal information to anyone, including saying the name of who we think lives at an address. Now, if you have the census ID, you go ahead and fill it in, click log in. If you do not, there is an opportunity to click another link right below login, and you can then fill out the address yourself. Now, answering without the ID number. In order to do that, we do need to figure out where you were on April the 1st. So we do try to narrow it down a little bit. So you would fill in the state, you would then fill in the city, and there we go. If you have the full, whoops, wait a minute, it's bouncing around on me here. Okay. I am sorry, I do not understand why this is happening. I don't usually have the tech problems. There we go. So you would normally fill in the state, the U.S. state, and from there, okay. This is really weird for me. Do you live on a rural route address? Will you be experiencing homelessness? Those are all things that you can answer as you go through the address questions. Now, if you are unhoused, again, we want to identify the city, the state, and the zip code that you lived in. So if you lived in downtown San Jose, you would put San Jose, California, 95126, I believe is that zip code area. And if you don't have any of this information, it's not going to stop you, but it does also let you say, if you would like, where you were at that time. So for instance, if a person in downtown San Jose was staying in the Guadalupe River Park, they can put Guadalupe River Park in this, on this page down below here. Next up, we're going to go through this form by naming each of the people. The first person, being the person that's filling it out, is generally referred back to later as person number 1. So you fill out the first, middle, and last name if you have all of that information. And then you click add another person for each additional person living there. Okay? And you'll see at the top of the page, as you fill it out, it'll add each of the names that you have added in the list at the top, and you'll know how many have already been included. There is a trick to this. You do want to add everyone who lived in your house on April the 1st, 2020. By everyone, we mean everybody who was staying there for any reason that's going to be there for the majority of the year, whether that be someone who was just staying with you for a few months while they're getting back on their feet, or it's a visitor to your home that's going to be there for more than 6 months. That's the house where they should be counted. Okay? Moving forward, we're going to check to see if anyone's missing, and it's going to ask you these questions to make sure that you've included all of those folks. Roommates and non-relatives, people without permanent places to live, couch surfers, those folks that you're just helping out, like I said, they all go on your list, okay? Now, keep in mind also, there is no issue with you putting that information down because your landlord, your local government, your federal government, no one's gonna know who's living in that house. In fact, they're not gonna know how many people are living in that address for over 70 years. In 72 years, we'll release all the information, but by then it will not make much of a difference who was living there in 2020. Okay? Moving forward, you'll notice is if there are any more additional, you do click yes, and it'll then ask you to add those names back in. Otherwise, you go down and you click next. Now, it asks if you are renting or owning. Okay? The reason for this information, some people are a little concerned because they think it's a financial question. And yes, it does have something to do with your finances, but it's not going, again, it's not going to be identified as you owning or renting. It will be identified that this building is inhabited by someone who owns or rents. That's all it comes across, and it's not even going to be this building. It'll be 1 out of 100 buildings. And since you know there's more than one of them, it won't be able to be brought down to just you. It would For instance, in the neighborhood I live in, this block that I live on, there are a dozen houses. And of those dozen houses, I know that 4 of them are rented out. There are people that bought them as an investment. So 4 out of the 12 in my neighborhood would count as rentals, and the rest are owned by the residents. And again, it's statistics. So again, no one by name is identified. Now, if it's occupied without payment of rent, for instance, if you are staying in your parents' house and they're just letting you live there, no problem. Again, it doesn't matter. This information is used in the planning for the city because people who own their homes, there are different needs than rental areas. You'll find out that when a person owns their home, sometimes they'll go ahead and take care of things, whereas if it's a rental area, the city may have to put more money into planning for the streets and the infrastructure around. Now, moving forward, you will now notice, we've gotten to this point, you'll have all the household questions, the people questions, and you'll see that there are people listed there. So as you can see, you're going to click on each of those start buttons to fill in the information about the individuals. And this is where we're going to get into the meat of the whole situation. First of all, they're going to be asking for the individual's sex. And we ask that everyone identify themselves as they see themselves. Therefore, if you have someone who considers themselves to be a transgender individual or someone who is does not identify as the gender they were assigned at birth, they can put what they see themselves. And this is not, we don't go back and check to make sure that person is that. We don't even verify based on their name if it sounds like it's a male name and they put female, because that doesn't matter to us. This is how everyone identifies themselves. So please make sure that if you've got someone in your household that may not be comfortable saying that out loud, give them the opportunity to sit down at the computer and fill it out themselves. That way nobody else will hear them. You'll notice that we ask for both the age of the person and the date of birth. And that is because the statistics for each of those things on April the 1st go to different areas of the government or different statistics that we provide. Okay, and keep in mind that they could, I mean, the computer will also obviously check that and verify. And if there is a discrepancy, what they'll do is they may call you later down the line and ask you just to verify one of those points of information. Or they might knock on your door, but we're trying to avoid that by getting that done today. Now, moving forward, it does ask for Hispanic origin, and it will also be asking about race here in just a moment. These are separate questions because they are based on specific situations within our government. The Hispanic origin was something that came about in the 60s, and that question has been around that long. However, we've added in some variations on race, and we're going to see that here in just a moment. So many folks are going to just put, no, they're not. However, if a person does identify as any of these, I want you to notice that you can also say specifically what that origin is. And so if you're Ecuadorian, you can put in Ecuador at the bottom there, or Dominican, Colombian, Guatemalan, etc. You can identify yourself again as you know your history to be. You're not limited to just the information on the page. This is kind of exciting for a lot of folks because, for instance, the population in Santa Clara is highly Portuguese. And in 2010, it didn't show any Portuguese because they were considered part of one of the other race questions. This time, they're going to be able to identify themselves on the next page as being white Portuguese. Okay. Now, the next page does offer the opportunity to fill in specific race, either white or black or African American. And again, you get to fill in the blank if you have a specific country that your family heritage is from. For those of you who like to do your family tree, you might have all that easily accessible to you. The next page does continue the race questions, including American Indian or Alaskan Native. And a person can put down the specific tribe or group that they feel they belong to. And then the various other race options. Please notice there is other Asian because there are folks that are not specifically listed there. I do need to step back one time on this here just to go back to the white. Please notice that Lebanese, Egyptian, Italian are all included in white. This is a question that some people are still concerned about because some folks don't identify as white and Egyptian, for instance. We're asking people to go ahead and fill in the information as they identify themselves, because if there's going to be changes made to the form, the statistics from this year are going to be used to prove why it's needed. So please make sure you fill it out as you see yourself. And that does include the other ones here as far as American and Indian and Alaska Native or the other Asian. If you feel that you do not belong in one of the categories listed, fill out that write-in section. As we continue, you'll see there are even more opportunities, including other Pacific Islander. And if you don't have anything that matches anything on here, you could actually go down to some other race and enter the race or origin there. And that will then be brought into the data pool as well. Keep in mind, if a person puts that they live in Whoville, and we don't have a lot of people to put in Whoville, ultimately that will not necessarily make it into the statistics. However, if you identify as a ethnicity or a race that is not listed, please go ahead and write it in here. And if it is enough people say that or write it in, it will show up as a statistical portion of the data we provide. Now, another important point about this is the relationship to person one. So if you're filling out the form and you've got your friends and your relatives all around you that live in the house, you're going to need to identify how each of them identify with you. There is a change this year in that in the past there were the option to put spouse or husband, wife, but only those words were used. This year they have added the opportunity for opposite sex husband, wife, spouse, as well as same-sex husband, wife, spouse. And they've included unmarried partners because we're moving in a direction that many of our couples and our families don't necessarily adhere to the same marriage constructs that we have in the past. So we want to make sure that we identify those households as well and not have them be left out. People that are in committed relationships, whether they're married or not, do make a difference in the statistics and the planning, again, for a city. For instance, healthcare is different for singles living together than it would be for a family living together, because there generally are insurances available in families more likely than in the single households. So these are just some possible uses of the data. You'll notice you've got all the options here, including biological, adopted, steps, your parents, your grandchildren, son-in-laws, other relatives. And then we go to non-relatives such as roommates or housemates or other non-relative. Okay? So if that person that was down the street got put out of their house and you're putting them up for a few weeks because they had a fire, they're another in the other non-relative category. Okay? I'm going to move forward here. Now keep in mind, we're going to ask your questions at the end. So if I'm going too quickly, just jot down your questions on a note and we'll get back to those. Now your final questions do come down to a few odds and ends that we're going to get through. And so you can take a look here. You'll notice that those same names are now listed, and they don't say start anymore. They say edit. That means you filled them out. If you have anybody else you need to add in at this point, please do. And I want you to know the most undercounted individual in 2010 was a child between 0 and 5 years of age. For some reason, some folks don't feel that children should be counted in the census. And whether that's protecting them from big data or what they think they're doing, we don't understand. But just to give you an idea, those children from 10 years ago are now in either grade school, high school, or even on up into college. And so we would hope that everyone will include every person, including every child, in their list of residents. All right. So going on to our final questions, you'll notice that we have a few odds and ends here. It does ask you if everyone has been counted, and it's going to check with you on the people that are in your houses. If you put names of individuals who are normally at college, and this is a little bit weird this year because of the COVID situation. Many of the colleges shut down in the middle of March and sent the kids home. However, what we're asking people to do is, if their child would have been at a college or university address on April the 1st and just got sent home because of COVID, go ahead and count them at that university address or that college address, because that's where they would have lived the majority of the year, not at home. This does make a difference, because when your children go to universities and colleges, they use the streets and the healthcare and the grocery stores. Those plans and those structures within the community are all built around the data from the census. So if you have a child that came home because of COVID, we ask that you still count them at the university or college where they would have attended. And they can do that themselves by just going on, entering the address where they would have attended and their information, and it will be compiled with their fellow college students who were living in that space. They don't even have to do it with their friends and buddies. They can do it individually themselves. Please note that we've got folks who are in nursing homes, military assignments, folks who are seasonal second residents. If your family has a residence for the summer and a residence for the winter, we ask that you identify which one would you have lived at on April the 1st, and is it the one you would live at for more than 6 months out of the year? So these all sound like they're a little confusing, but as you can see, the form does explain to you every single thing. All right, it does ask if anybody stays somewhere else. So for instance, if Jane Doe really stays at college, you click on that and it's going to ask you to further explain that in the next screen. Now, at that point, you're ready to submit your responses. And you can either go back and edit if you want to, or go back and review one more time, or click Submit Questionnaire. Once you have submitted your questionnaire, you are done. You will not be able to use that 12-digit code again. However, if you need to edit the form, you can still go back in, enter the address, and put in new information. And that may mean that if you're adding another person or something of that nature, no problem. If you're editing something you've already submitted, that you'll probably end up needing to reach out through our phone line and call in on that. All right. Now, confirmation. When you are done, you're going to get a screen like this on your computer. You're going to want to go ahead and save or print that screen just so that you have it yourself. Because if for some reason someone reaches out and says that they haven't received your census, you have proof of it right here, and likely that person will not be with the Census Bureau, because we will have given you this confirmation information and said you have completed the job. If you have further questions at that point, you can always visit the website, 2020census.gov. And the phone number there is the one that you would use for any additional changes, as I mentioned, or if there are just some other questions that you've got and you would like to talk to a person rather than look it up on the website. All right. Now, the thing I want to do now is just cover a few of the useful, helpful tips that we've noticed in presenting to folks. These are things that people really tend to need a tweak on. Using the login from any mailing will speed up the process, as I had mentioned earlier. So pull out anything that you got from the Census Bureau, U.S. Census Bureau, or Census 2020, and use that number. You can complete it without the number, but you will need to answer more questions because you have to fill in your own address and information. It will time out after 15 minutes. So if you're in the middle of doing it and you need to run to the kitchen and turn off the fire, try to do it and come back within 15 minutes, or have one of the other residents sit down at the computer and put their information while you're off stirring the pasta. Do not use your web browser buttons. Don't use the back and the forward. Please use the buttons within the questionnaire on the page, because if you do, you may end up getting booted out or needing to restart your questionnaire. There is a help button located in the top right corner of all the pages. And if a question is skipped, you will be prompted to answer, but if you click next, you can continue without answering. And I want to make sure you understand that if you do that, it is more likely someone will reach out to you to try and get that information. It is always best to fill out all of the questions, and we strongly encourage everyone to do that. But if you choose to skip over a question for some reason, you can. However, one of our staff will reach out to you either by phone if you provided a phone number, email if you gave us an email address, or they'll come out and knock on your door along with the enumerators that are coming out to get those forms that weren't filled out. Okay? It's not too late to respond on your own, whether online, over the phone, or by mail, and all without having to meet a census taker. That's the big message I want you to have today. You can do this. You don't need one of us. Just go ahead and get it done, and that will eliminate the opportunity or the need for someone to visit you to get that information from you. All right. We do also want you to understand that should we need to interact with you, we do have a specific response for COVID that does include how we are going to take precautions to keep not only you safe, but also our employees. I'm in the county of Santa Clara, and here we're going to be hiring well over 2,000 people to come out and knock on doors. We are supplying them with masks, and for those that are going to interact with people directly, we'll be getting them gloves. There will also be hand sanitizer provided to each of them so that they can keep safe and keep individuals safe in the public. We do knock and ring the doorbell and step back and maintain a 6 feet distance throughout the interaction. We conduct interviews outside of your house, never going inside your house. No census employee is allowed to go inside your home. Census takers cannot be accompanied by community partners or media due to Title 13. And I didn't mention the words Title 13 earlier, but just so you understand, everything you do and everything you give us as far as information is protected by Title 13. Title 13 came about after World War II when data was used to identify the Japanese communities within the United States. And after World War II, Congress enacted Title 13 to protect this information so that could never happen again. No one, no matter how big of a fit they throw or how many tweets they put out, will be able to access your personal data. Any census employee who, for any reason, provides personally identifiable data will be fined up to, oh goodness, 5 years in prison and $200,000 fine, I believe. I can't afford either of those myself. So I definitely won't be talking about your personal information when I leave my job. And just so you know, that does follow for all census employees, not just while they're in the job, but forever. We are not allowed to discuss the census work that we did that in any way that would identify either individuals or businesses that we worked with. So, all right. At that point, I do want to make sure that you have our contact information. My name is Raymond Mueller. I am the lead specialist here in Santa Clara County, and Sonny Lay is our lead partnership specialist in the Bay Area. He deals more with the Peninsula and Bay, San Francisco. If you need that information, it will be available to you from the folks who are hosting our webinar today, and you can also pull it off the screen at this point. Feel free to reach out to us directly if you would like, and we'll be happy to assist you in any way we can. I think that concludes everything I have to say today. I'm going to go ahead and flip over here and go to our questions screen, because if there are questions at this point, we're going to be stopping the recording, and that questions will be brought up through, I believe, chat. And I'm going to turn back over now to our host and ask them to take over.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was a really informative presentation. So thank you so much for helping to educate us and our seniors about the 2020 census. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we are going to move to questions. Thank you.
Thank you.